Jack Davenport is probably the most powerful person in podcasting, and I bet you haven't heard of him. He co-founded and became managing director of Goalhanger Podcasts, the largest independent podcast network in the UK.
It's easier to make a show that works for 200 million people.
You may recognise his co-founder, but if Lineker is the face, then Davenport is the brains. Their stable includes The Rest is Politics, The Rest is Entertainment, The Rest is Football, and The Rest is History. Goalhanger Podcast has a stable of shows that do 30 million downloads a month. We chatted to him about the future of podcasting.
The future of podcasting is that
Does everything need to be videoed?
probably 90% of the people I've hired in the last 6 to 9 months have been doing that.
And where he thinks the mega shows are heading next.
If we've got this far without really trying to do it, if we start focusing on it, it's going to be important.
Jack, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thanks for having me.
Who do you think would make the best goalkeeper out of Michael Richards, Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker?
But if we're talking about now, the answer to all of them is probably going to be Micah.
Who do you think of their peak?
I once saw Alan Shearer have a penalty saved, which didn't happen. Very often in his career. Birmingham City in a League Cup, second round game or something in the late 90s. But Gary and Alan have such a pathological hatred of the concept of defending that they're so focused on scoring goals that I would say it would have to be Micah.
Which podcast do you listen to outside of the Goalhanger stable?
I don't get tons of time to listen to.
Barely keep up with your own life.
It is actually a genuine thing that we've had to address internally. Is that obviously I need to and want to know what other people are doing and what's going on in the industry. But we also put out so much content, and I want to be across, as much as I can. And there are literally only so many hours in the week. So, when I'm listening for pure pleasure, I listen to loads of American sport podcasts. That's my escape.
Okay.
There's a brilliant podcast, which I've discovered recently on the more sort of business side. In America, I'm sure you've come across it. It's called Acquired.
Yeah.
And I kind of see it as that's just basically The Rest is History, but for businesses.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that.
You genuinely need a spare 3.5 hours.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah. That's one for a plane ride or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are probably my go-tos outside of my sort of core listening. I'm trying to think of other good stuff.
How does the week structure? You've got this thing now where you're having to manage loads more people as well, right? How are you structuring the week at Goalhanger?
Badly, I don't know.
It must be an exciting place.
It's fantastic. It's it's incredibly exciting. We've got there. One of the brilliant things about working in an exciting, growing business like this is that there are so many opportunities. Is actually half the battle is picking the ones to focus on, which is a lovely position to be in. But
I heard a good phrase the other day, maybe startups never starve, they drown.
Yeah,
and I thought that's so true.
I can completely relate to that. So I spend my time in all sorts of different meetings and conversations. A lot of it more recently has been focused on the commercial side. So that's managing our relationship with Spotify, building out our own offering there, going over to America and trying to build relationships on that side. We are, in terms of the actual day-to-day production, there is a regular cadence, Rest is History records on this day, Rest is Politics records on that day. But in terms of my time, it is it's a little bit of everything.
I was really intrigued to see that you, in the last year since we met at the podcast show, have gone from 5 to 25 people at Goalhanger.
Yeah.
How do the teams sort of separate and break down?
So most of the people we've hired in the last 6 to 9 months have been we've invested a lot in a video team. So long form video for YouTube, and then cut downs for social, and then all the kind of the production needs that go around that. So social producers, video editors, a couple of senior staff are in there. That's been the biggest. That's essentially a new department that we didn't have this time last year. So probably 90% of the people I've hired in the last 6 to 9 months have been doing that. And then elsewhere, we make, I think this time last year, we probably had 2 big shows and 3 or 4 growing shows. And now we have probably double that on both accounts. So just the natural growth of the show production teams, the audio producers has been a fair bit of that as well. And the surrounding support, a few more senior roles. We were quite top heavy this time. That's we were quite bottom heavy this time last year. So we've had a couple of our first more senior hires as well. So I think we're up to 28 now. And it'll probably be close to 40 by the end of the year, I would think, at the current rate.
And so what are the sort of like senior roles that you're kind of like looking to develop?
So a lot of this time last year we brought in a head of content. So that's more in the weeds of the day-to-day production, to be honest, taking a lot of that off my plate, as my focus goes towards more like strategic or commercial, or even just the recruiting, which takes a lot of time in itself. Yeah. We've also brought in, a lot of it has been to a degree like professionalizing, like finance, ops.
Yeah.
We're starting to build our own commercial team.
Yeah.
So we've made 1 hire in that area, and there's probably hopefully going to be another. We're going to be growing that team this year as well. So it's people who can own things and push them forward. I mean, my background is a content producer, not business. It's as far away from business as you can be, because I was I cut my teeth at the BBC, which is like the opposite of a commercial environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it is us piecing it together as we go along and working out like what grown up efficient businesses have, working out what we need, how we want to grow. The sort of social video team's a great example where that's not our area of expertise, so we needed to bring someone in to kind of lead that strategy. And
how do you find sort of trying to do this strategy, because you're producing a huge amount of content? I mean, one of the things that kind of defines a lot of the Goalhanger stable is weekly shows, like bi-weekly, tri-weekly almost effectively. How do you kind of like step out of that sort of day to day and think about the strategic side of where podcasting is going?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. You need good people that you trust to do it. We've been really lucky in how we've hired, both on the sort of on the junior level of the podcast producers who are like at the coalface, like a day-to-day, like producing all the shows, and in the myself, my business partner, and our head of content are still pretty close to the content of a lot of the shows. We each take the lead on different shows probably, but there are still a lot of times where business partner and I are attending recordings and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it takes focus to be able to it takes a lot of trust to be able to like step back from that and know that the show's in good hands. So how it works in practice a lot of the moment is we'll be much more closely involved at the launching stage of a show and the piloting and the sort of getting the talent and the tone right and that sort of part of it. And then when we've got it to a good place where we feel like the production is working well, the show sort of knows what it is, it's found its audience, it's growing, that's when we're more comfortable sort of taking a step back and letting it continue under its own steam.
So what's the difference between an executive producer and a producer?
So in our case, an exec producer is someone who would have more overarching, kind of an overarching remit over multiple shows, where they're not making a running order. They're not the main voice there for the talent, like talking through like what we're going to be talking about next, like how are we going to be doing that. That's the job of the producer.
Yeah.
But they are the constant presence there to be the kind of senior reassuring presence for the talent and to back up the producer.
Yeah.
And then to be that sounding board for listening through to the content, both live and after the fact, after the edit, what worked here, what didn't work there, and then if there's something that's been missed during the recording, being that kind of person who can be a level back from it and say, oh, have you thought about doing this, or do you want to rephrase that, or why don't you pick up on that point? So it is that, and those kind of people need to have really good editorial sense. They need to know the law, like what you can and can't say, how not to get sued, that sort of thing. So quite often they've had like some sort of formal journalistic training. And they're people who have been around production for a longer time and know the kind of challenges that will pop up. For most often for us, it's like the biggest, the most, what we put the most focus on in our production is the talent production, the talent relationships. So that's massively important to have that constant reassuring sort of presence there.
And so what's the kind of like mindset that you're looking for at Goalhanger when it comes to recruiting? So we'll see if we can help your recruiting timescale slightly.
Sure.
Like into like what are the things that make a good kind of Goalhanger employee?
Are you loving podcasts, loving audio? Like not necessarily ours.
Yeah.
Like that can help in some circumstances, but we also want people who just love the medium and can bring and listen to a lot of it, have a lot of opinions. Like that is the absolute like number one kind of important thing. Because we're fortunate in that everyone who works, pretty much everyone that can work for us, I can say hand on heart, like really loves the content. And if you start from that point of view, like it does feel, it feels like everyone's like rowing in the same direction, trying to get to the same goal, and people are motivated to work hard for it because in a lot of cases for our shows, they've loved the show before coming to work on it, and so they want to continue that. We're in a privileged position because we've got shows that loads of people listen to and really love. So we're lucky in that we have a lot of interest in working for us, but it's much more so for very the most junior level of producers or like assistant producers or researchers, it's just people who love podcasts, might love our content as well, and kind of get it from a conceptual point of view, able to talk well about like what works, what doesn't work. That's probably the first thing I look for.
That's interesting. And I also see you or were recently, you may have done it now, but hiring a kind of PR manager. And what I think is so interesting about that partly is that podcasting is a very new, nascent industry in some ways, but in other ways, it's just like radio, local radio almost. And it's been interesting to see it sort of, you guys almost going back to the beginning of what you started with Goalhanger Films in terms of hiring more video people, etc. But I'm just quite interested in how you think that it may end up, podcasting as new media actually becoming old media.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's content that people are going to spend time with, so there are going to be similarities to radio and TV and any kind of media content production business. We want to see ourselves as evolving beyond being like an audio specific company. So, we want people to be able to reach our shows wherever they consume content, whether that's like on social media, on YouTube, or in podcast form. So that's kind of why we've gone down the video route. But in terms of the PR and comms manager, it's just that has come about pretty much from just we've never really put a great deal of thought into the way we promote ourselves, other than being like promoting our shows within our own podcasts. Like that is our main, most effective method of getting a new show out there. We've gotten a lot of press coverage over the last few years, partly because of who we're co-owned by, partly because of like the success of the shows. But that means that we just thought that, look, if we've got this far without really trying to do it, if we start focusing on it and actually start thinking about like what message we want to be putting out there, it's going to be important. There's also an angle to it where, without wanting to get too far into the weeds, for the majority of our existence, our commercial function has pretty much been outsourced to like Acasts, ad sales partners who sell the ad space in our shows, which is our main source of revenue. We're trying to take more control of that, of that now. So obviously we have like direct to consumer subscription for our shows where people pay like a set amount and get for access to bonus content. We've done live tours, we've done book deals. We're starting to do our own commercial deals with sponsors and advertisers. And so for the first time, who Goalhanger is becoming a relevant and important thing to tell people about, rather than just
the show.
This is the rest is history. This is the rest is politics. This is us from Rory. This is, that's the, that's been where our message is focused, because ultimately, from a audience point of view, that's who we want the audience to be creating the bond with, the hosts, the shows. But from a commercial point of view, when we're trying to work with people commercially, it becomes more relevant, like who Goalhanger are, and that we're not just the rest is politics or whatever show they might listen to. We are a wider kind of network of shows that do more than make podcasts.
Where did you first meet Gary Lineker, out of interest?
I think I met Gary first working on, I think he was working on the first series of the Match of the Day Top 10 podcast. I think it was in 2019, maybe the start of 2020. So that's a BBC podcast which is still going, which is it's a format it was originally with Gary, Alan Shearer and Ian Wright, and it was like, Premier League's top 10 best strikers. Yeah. So it exists as a podcast on BBC Sounds, and it's filmed and goes out on iPlayer and occasionally on BBC One after Match of the Day.
Yeah.
So that was my first. That was the first time I met Gary. The reason Goalhanger podcasts came about. Gary's production company was Goalhanger Films, which was a TV production company specialising in like sport documentaries, making shows for the BBC, for NBC in America. And Gary's business partner in that, a guy called Tony Pasta, who's the sort of third co-owner of Goalhanger Podcasts. I met him through a previous business which was focused on commission-based audio podcasting, and that was how we ended up working together on the Match of the Day Top 10 podcast, and that's how I met those guys.
And talk to the business model is really interesting, of like what you're trying, and you're trying different things per show as well. So some subscriptions, some live shows, etc. Just give us an idea of like where it sort of breaks down. And I'd also be interested in your views on this in terms of UK podcasting ad market, about 60 million according to PwC, whereas in the States it's like 1.6 billion, right? So granted they're a bigger country, but they're not that much bigger.
Could be, I mean, we were in the States last week having meetings, talking about this exact thing. Like, I don't know how many times that is, but say it's 30 times smaller,
Yeah.
It'd be great if it was 15 times smaller.
Yeah.
For us anyway. Yeah, I mean, our main source of revenue is advertising on the pods. And then, being a purely ad funded revenue model has its ups and downs. It's seasonal. You're affected when you get to our scale. You're affected by like the macroeconomic advertising climate. So last 2023 was a pretty bad year for advertising as a whole. So yeah, we tried to develop alternate revenue streams. The subscription stuff has been really powerful for us. Like it's it's great because it develops the deeper bond with your biggest fans, and you can give them more of what they love, and you can have that direct relationship with them. So that's something we put a lot of focus on, and then everything else,
And how do you get the right sort of, like with the rest is politics, for example, there's a newsletter and a Discord and so like how do you sort of get that community right as well? Because you've also got to get talent.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying different things with it all the time. Like we have 4 members clubs at the moment. All of them have slightly different benefits. We've learned every time we've done one. We've done it on different platforms. We've done it with different benefits each time, because there's a balance between how much ad revenue you're going to generate from doing an extra show and how many people are going to pay for that content if you put it behind a paywall. So you have to weigh that essentially, and you have to weigh how much of the talent's time that you're going to take up, because that's probably the most precious commodity that you're trying to weigh. So you just have to iterate, work it out, work what works for the talent, what makes sense for the show itself. And yeah, I don't think there'll be anyone in the UK with more like paying members than us from the podcast side. And it's an area we massively believe in, and we'll keep investing in.
Yeah. And what are the future for those communities? I find it sort of fascinating in that sense of like there's so many different kind of platforms out there, and you talk about wanting to be a 360 media company, and then it's so hard with these different platforms because it's like, you're going to use Discord, you're going to use Telegram, it's just it's sort of, it's kind of never ending, and it's changing a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a nightmare. Like you have to, different things work for different clubs. We've tried, and we tried Patreon for a while, and we went away from it. Then we've tried tons of different ones. I think that the key thing is, for most of the shows, the key product is the audio product. So if you can offer a bonus episode every week, like we do for The Rest is History, that's really significant and important. And then getting access to the customer, the fans' information, basically their email address. So then you can just tell them, we've done this bonus episode this week, we're doing this live stream at this time.
And they can also feedback about.
They can feedback. They can, you can give them preferential access to live show tickets for, book launches, things like that. So as long as you have a hub where you can, it's owning your audience effectively.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most important part. And then it's just about how your messaging and all the members' benefits, fits into that wider kind of relationship picture.
Why do you think the ad market is so much bigger in the US? What did you glean from your trip out there?
Podcasting as a medium is more developed. More people listen to it.
Because it's about 1 in 5 at the moment in the UK, right? Listen to a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the kind of metrics that you look at, 1 in 5, of adults, 30% we've heard in some figures. So more people listen to podcasts. There's a lot more. Ad markets in general feel bigger. Like there's bigger budgets around it, because I suppose they've got a massive internal market. So the media is more. It's easier to make a show that works for 200 million people. So there's like internal market dynamics there. On a wider level, I think maybe because of those like competitive dynamics, the media agencies in particular have had to be more creative about how they about where they spend and how effective it is. I think in the UK, the world of media agencies and commercial partnerships is like, we're still learning it, but it seems like they have, in the UK, they've got quite an entrenched way of working. There's a lot of deep relationships there with traditional linear TV and radio that are just taking a while to evolve. Like,
Yeah.
Listening, if you had a graph of like podcast listening versus, percentage change versus linear TV or linear radio, we would be trending upwards and they would be trending downwards. But the relationships are still there that hasn't filtered through to the spend yet.
Yeah.
I think podcasting has a problem. The growth of podcasting advertising in the US was initially mainly based around like direct response brands. So, buy this mattress, use this, go to this URL, type in this code that tells us you came from this podcast. And that gives you a really clear, just from the brand's perspective, a really clear measure of how effective it is. Like if you do a podcast advert and enough people buy your mattress to then pay for that advert, it's just a very simple equation. So that's how it grew in the US, and then I think the bigger brands took notice of that. I think we're still in that process in the UK where we were in a room with a media agency, 80 people from media agencies recently, and they're just on a pure like hands up in the room kind of test, like less than 20% of those people had booked campaigns on podcasts. So from our perspective, there's massive headroom there.
Yeah.
Like,
in a way, it's quite good news.
It is, because it means that there's loads of headroom to grow into, and we really believe in like how effective and personalized we can make our messagings. And we know from the direct response stuff that we do, sign up to the New European or that sort of thing, it really works for those brands.
Yeah.
So bigger brands with bigger budgets will continue to come into it, and we'll back ourselves. But we need a little bit more. I'll be careful what I go.
Yeah,
a lot of what we're doing when we're talking to media agencies is still that like education piece. This is why podcasting is really effective. You may not listen to podcasts. These are the kind of, this isn't a niche like part of a of the industry anymore. There are a lot of people consuming content in this way.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to we'll keep pushing forward on that trying to be standard bearers for the industry and pushing that forward, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up and get some way towards the levels that you see in the US.
Yeah, we could all do with you doing well on that. Talk to us about the kind of creative process of putting a show together, right? So like the really fun bit, because is this something that you're like doing quicker and quicker now, like more and more shows kind of coming out? Just what's the sort of creative process that you go through for it, and where do you think, again, without giving too much away, I appreciate this, but what else might we be seeing kind of come down the track in 24, 25?
So the main focus of our production is on the talent.
Yeah.
We are very fortunate with the hosts that we work with, but what we're trying to do is to create a really engaging partnership who people want to spend time with. So that comes from the warmth and the tone of their conversation and their expertise or relevance to the subject matter. That is the main thing we look for. Like, it sounds kind of ridiculous to say it, but the actual genre or what they're actually going to be talking about is sometimes almost secondary to that like relationship part of it. So in the case of The Rest is History, which was our first kind of big hit, we thought there was a gap in the market for a history podcast, which was chat format and could span the entirety of history effectively. We wanted to keep the barriers to entry low for people, so it didn't matter if they discovered it in a year's time. They wouldn't have to feel like they had to go back through 100 episodes.
Yeah.
They could pick an episode on Henry. I'm interested in Henry VIII. I'll give that one a go. I'm interested in JFK or whatever it might be. And so in that case, we wanted to work with Tom Holland. We sort of identified him as someone who would be really, had clearly had a lot to say, had a lot of personality, could bring something to it. And then we spoke to Tom and said, look, we want to do this. This is the kind of show we want to create. Who would you like to do it with? Who do you have really good conversations with? Ideally, they bring a slightly different angle to you. So like the dynamic for The Rest is History is that Tom is a ancient history specialist and Dominic Sandbrook is specialized in like the modern history of Britain and America. So having that counterpoint has worked well for us as well, just having slightly different angles. But we like there to be an existing relationship, so we're not trying to build something on air. And then after that point, it's piloting it, working out, have we got something here? Is it working? Are they going to have enough to talk about? Our shows, you mentioned earlier, we do a lot of shows. Like we want to be high volume, because we believe that we're trying to build habits with the audience that they want to spend time with these hosts, and that's what's bringing them back to the show every week. So
how many pilots do you do on average?
Depending, very, very how long is a piece of string. So if it works, then we crack on straight away.
Yeah.
If we need to develop it or some parts haven't worked, we do more. I won't tell you which of our shows have been at which end of that spectrum. It's not fair to the host, but so for The Rest is Politics, we did one pilot and it was like, this is definitely going to work.
Yeah. The timing of that was incredible, right?
Yeah, we were, fast to say, fortunate. I mean, it wasn't fortunate for the people of Ukraine or, we launched 2 weeks after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then, it was spring 2022, just ahead of Boris Johnson, all the drama around that, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. So it felt like there was just, episode 1, Alistair Campbell telling a story about being in a room with Putin, negotiating, like, so already you're kind of gripped by it. And then, Crazy Year in British Politics, at least of the last 3. And it just, the show very quickly found an audience and hit a note that people were looking for.
I imagine on the production side, really, like, I suppose that goes back to my question earlier about producers and exec producers of like, they've almost produced it themselves after a while, right? Like, in terms of they know what they want to talk about, they know what's kind of in the news, right?
Sure. Like, I mean, we are like in the grand scheme of production, audio production, we are on the lighter end of it in terms of like hands-on editing. Like, we're not making incredible 10-part, investigative series that take 200 grand and 6 months of like in-depth journalistic work. All our production goes into putting the talent in a position to be the brilliant, engaging personalities they are, and also bringing the kind of the awareness and the experience of what an audience is interested to hear them talking about.
Yeah.
So obviously all of our hosts have interests and stories that will pique their interest, and they'll want it to have their opinion on and they want to talk about on the show. But then we will also say, that's great, this is a huge thing in the news as well. Have you got anything on this? Maybe we could tie that to that. So it's a collaborative process. And then it is again quite horses for courses, in that opinion-based shows like led on by the events of the day, like The Rest is Politics or The Rest is Football.
Yeah.
There is a ready-made agenda there based on like the news of the day or the weekend Premier League football action. Whereas our history shows, there can be a lot more like planning and scripting that go into it. Sometimes we're trying to hit like topical notes. So we might do, an episode on, to take the Russian-Ukraine example, we did an episode on the history of Russia and Ukraine, but a lot of the time it's forward planning, like, okay, what we're going to do in 6 months' time. Can we tie it to anything? How can we start the process of the research? So differs by show, but the key element is making sure that we get to significant volume, like put out multiple shows a week. So you have to be able to be quick and adaptable.
What sectors do you think are sort of slightly underserved by the podcast sort of world at the moment? Because you almost stumbled into history a little bit. I
Sure.
remember just you saying that you were interested in history and there wasn't a good World War II sort of podcast out there, etc. What areas do you think might be underserved? My wife was telling us earlier that she was listening to gardening podcasts, which was a revelation to me. Like, I didn't even like that. But Gardener's World has been a big show on BBC for ages, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, there is need for, certainly if you go by the chart position, like big shows that are catered to women with hosts who are women. That's an area that we're very keen to expand into. But that's not to say women aren't listening to podcasts. I think the listening habits are different, and the type of shows that are being made are maybe catering to more male audiences, at least at like the top end of of the charts. And yeah, I mean there's so many different types of podcasts to be made. Like the kind of high production shows that I'm mentioning, I think the top show in the charts at the moment is a new Wondery show, which is kind of that ilk. They're so different to what we do. It's almost like we're operating in a completely different world. Like it's completely different shows, but still brilliant, still with their own massive audiences. So, and the issue with podcasts and trying to build a podcast company is that there are 1 million podcasts out there, and there's probably 10,000 really good ones.
Yeah.
But how do you find them if you don't have a distribution network? Like you need to. That people think of podcasts as like a new form of media, but the tech that underpins them has, it's Web 1. It's existed since the like early 2000s. So there's no algorithmic method that you're going to buy, like TikTok, by quality of content you're going to be put in front of people, and it's not a meritocracy. Like you need to be able to put it in front of people, which is why traditionally it's been dominated by big publishers like the BBC, who can put it across radio, online, TV, wherever they want to promote it.
Yeah. You can listen to the Today programme, which is one long trail for BBC podcasts.
Exactly. So, so having that distribution part is so important for trying to create a podcast and get it out there. You need to put as much thought into that as you need to put into the content. Yeah. So I don't think there's anything that's massively underserved, because there are so many great pods out there. It's just about finding them, and then from the business side, actually getting it out there.
So when did you sort of start thinking of taking the leap to video, and how have you kind of found that? Because you've got decent sort of subscriber numbers on YouTube and so on now, and that does have a bit more of that algorithmic sort of serving you stuff.
Well, that's one reason, because you do have a method of breaking out of your own distribution channels. For the first year we existed, we completely avoided it because it's really expensive and difficult compared to audio production.
Yeah.
So to take the example of The Rest is Politics, the first year that show was on, Rory Stewart was living in the Middle East, spending his time on planes between Africa and the US. We could get high, as good as studio quality audio out of him, or, with like a pencil case worth of kit and a basic internet connection from wherever he was in the world. As soon as you add video into that, it's just, there are a load more problems. All those people I talked about hiring in the last 6 months, it's expensive. It's production hungry compared to audio. So we were a startup business. We've never taken any investment. We've just, we've completely bootstrapped, like done it all ourselves, just putting our own time in and trying to generate revenue from ads. So we were really focused on making a great audio show and making it simple for the talent. All our talent have other jobs and write books and do all those sort of things.
Yeah.
We needed to fit into their lives. So keeping it low lift on the production side was a key part of how we grew. But I think the awareness of, firstly, just the trend as to like where content is going, and like I think it's a bit of a we had about we've got to a scale where we were able to start investing in it, but I think we were more switched on to the fact that ultimately what we have and what we make is compelling content.
Yeah.
For want of a better word, like people enjoy consuming like the conversation. There's no reason that has to be purely confined to an audio format. We need to go where the audiences are. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter to us in a perfect world whether they consume it on X or YouTube or Instagram as a 3-minute clip, as a 10-minute clip, as the full length thing, as a 60-second TikTok. The monetization channels for all those are slightly different, but will hopefully one day catch up to each other, and we'll be able to monetize all of them effectively. But we want to be able to reach people where they are. Like the statistic you cited earlier of the percentage of people who listen to podcasts compared to how many people go on Facebook or whatever other channel that we're looking at. And so there's absolutely a marketing benefit to it and just getting it in front of more people. And I think the commercial side will catch up to that. And so we're getting to a point at the moment where we're able to generate enough ad revenue from the just from the platforms, mainly YouTube and Facebook, that it's able to fund itself.
Yeah.
But you need to invest in getting it to that position because it is a lot of cash.
Yeah. Would you ever take investment in the future, do you think?
We've had a lot of approaches, but we've been, we really value being independent, and we really value, growing in the way we have done, backing our own ideas. I think if there was a big idea that we needed to invest more money than we have in, we would probably look to a loan, just speaking to a bank before anything else. I think strategic investment could be interesting as we look to expand into other territories. We'd love to be bigger in America. And our strength in distribution over here doesn't necessarily travel. It's not as strong over there, so maybe we do need more help. But yeah, I mean, it's not on our radar at the moment.
What's the future of podcasting and jobs in podcasting particularly? I mean, we touched on it there a lot about the video in terms of the past year and so on. I mean, I wondered whether the rest of politics would do something interesting around the election night, whether there'd be some kind of YouTube channel and so on. So I know you've experienced doing some lives there and so on, which worked really well. I'd just where do you sort of see the sector in kind of like 5 years' time? I should say that Channel 4 have got Rory and Alistair for the kind of main event.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be, that's through us. That's a Rest is Politics, like link up. So
fine.
We negotiated that deal because we wanted Rory and Alistair kind of front and center for that, and we'll be doing a lot of content around that as well.
Okay.
The future of podcasting is that people still think of podcasting as audio in your headphones. Like we're trying to evolve beyond that. They're just brilliant entertainment shows that happen not to be on a linear TV channel, but you can consume them in all the other places that you normally spend time consuming content. So I think you'll see a lot more of a lot more shows that work on video in the same way as they work in audio. It works really well for our style of production. So yeah, I think you'll see a lot more of that. Hopefully you'll see more ad money coming into it in the UK. I think you'll continue to see like bigger and bigger like talent working in audio. That's something that we've been able to be sort of at the we've been able to bring in talent to podcasting that previously you wouldn't have been able to, just because you wouldn't have been able to pay them enough, basically.
Speaking of talent management, I appreciate this is almost like sort of asking Pep Guardiola.
That's definitely not.
But in terms of like, what advice would you give to people that are wanting to start a podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Have in your head, first and foremost, how am I going to get in front of people? Because if you don't have an answer to that, it doesn't matter if you make the best podcast in the world. Like, if you can't get people to listen to it and recommend it to each other, then it will go nowhere. That's probably the bit that most people kind of underestimate. I mean, you've seen it doesn't have to be a super high tech way, or you don't have to be, on the BBC or anything like that. I mean, if you see some shows recently that have really utilized social media well and TikTok well, I'm thinking of the Shits and Gigs guys who've just sold out the O2 quicker than Alistair and Rory. You can find an audience if you know how to talk to the people that you're trying to talk to. So I guess it's like, have the audience that you're trying to talk to in mind and have a plan to talk to them.
How did you get guest booked for Tom Hanks, by the way?
Yeah, well, that was fantastic. That was on The Rest is History a couple of weeks ago. We have some relationships with a few of the museums and a few PR people. We get pitched so many people, obviously.
The inbox,
which we almost always ignore. But we, in that specific case, Tom, they had an opportunity with Tom to plug the exhibition that he was doing at the gallery at King's Cross about the moon landing. So we were able to put that together. It took a fair while to get it done, but he was fantastic.
Yeah. And final question, you're building politics pub quiz team. You've got the choice of Roy Stewart, Alistair Campbell, Marina Hyde, or Richard Osman. Who do you go with on your team?
Well, I mean, any pub quiz team, you're going to struggle to get beyond Richard Osman. I mean, Rory is, both Alistair and Rory are brilliant. But Rory is in a lot, he could be a historian. And he is an academic in a lot of ways. He teaches, like right now, he's at Yale teaching a course where he'll say, this is what happened in the Vietnam War. These are the strategic decisions that were made. Let's analyze them. So they are. And if it was politics, all those people are absolute genius of it. I mean, Marina is, she knows. Nothing that has happened in showbiz or politics in the last 50 years, I wouldn't back her on. So I have actually been in a pub quiz against Richard Osman recently, and I think I'm right in saying the Goalhanger team beat the team. Richard was actually on a different team. I think the Goalhanger team beat the team Richard was on, but I'm not. I think he was with. He was on quite an eclectic team. It was him. It was Grayson Perry. It was a few other sort of TV media personalities, and I think. I think he was holding them up one-handed. But
well, it sounds like a fun Christmas party, the Goalhanger Talents podcast, a quiz party. Jack, thanks so much for coming on Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. It's been brilliant to chat to you.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me.